We have a guest in the studio joining us, and he is a first-time visitor with me, but of course you were here a lot with Kelly Class in the past.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Kelly and Jill here often.
Greg Lanning joining us from the Twin Falls City Council, and first of all, we were having just a brief off-air conversation about what it is the public really wants to hear versus sometimes what you have to tell them.
Right.
But sometimes we tend to overlook that in media because we think that we've got to talk about some earth-shattering issue as if we're saving the world, but sometimes there's fun stuff to talk about that happens in the city of Twin Falls.
Sure. Well, we've got an upcoming celebration in July of the state's 125th anniversary of being of statehood, and on July 3rd out by the brand new visitor center, there's going to be a celebration there with entertainment and different things, American flags to be handed out and different things. Kind of a fun little thing that people can. It's only like 11 to 1 or something. It's kind of over lunch, and they're going to have food trucks there and all kinds of things for people to go out and celebrate Idaho's 125th. I think it'll be the city of Twin Falls. They're going with the county, our historical commission and the county when they're doing it together, and I think it's the cities, let me get my math done right, 111 of the city and 108 of the county. Most people don't realize the city of Twin Falls is older than Twin Falls County is. Twin Falls County was what we call now Twin Falls County originally was part of a larger Cassia County. So,
and then they divided that up as
right.
population grew, right?
Right. It was kind of a sheepman versus the cattleman thing. The Burley area was a lot of sheep. The cattlemen were all over in Twin Falls County, so they split a little bit based on that reasoning. So.
It's at 38 at our studios, 9:08 in the morning. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This is the Top Story with Bill Colley. And Greg Lanning is our guest. You know, I grew up in western New York State, and the far corner out in the Buffalo region. Mm-hmm. And most of that area from Lake Ontario south and west was all Holland Land Company at one time. And they had one county, and then they had two counties, then four, then eight, and then eventually there's about 20 counties in that region, all split up, similar probably to what happened as people moved west as well.
Right. Yeah, it was like the dividing of the states. Idaho was part of Montana at one point, and then part of Washington, Oregon at another point. And so just as the divisions, as you got more population in an area, and of course the Twin Falls area is quite a bit behind the rest of the areas because there really wasn't any reason to be here until Prine got some financiers in here to divert the water and Bureau of Reclamation projects and divert the water and make the crops grow like magic from our name, and so that we kind of came along later. A lot of the states like 1860, 1870, but this area is all the early 1900s.
You know, what's funny is it's one of the greenest parts of the state now, though. It
Right.
didn't start that way, but when you drive to Boise or you drive up to Sun Valley, you drive through a lot more parched area than you certainly do here.
Right. Well, just get the elevation just high enough that you can't get the water to it, and then suddenly it's going to be pretty dry. Yeah.
You have a lot going on in the way of building projects. We had a groundbreaking a few weeks ago with the governor here. He was involved
Right.
in that.
Cliff Bar.
There are so many different things. If I just take a drive not far from the studios here and through some of the neighborhoods on the back streets, there's an incredible amount of what I would call small business and small industry here that I don't see in a lot of other places. I read a story at Bloomberg this morning about how the number of Americans employed in manufacturing, they're now making on average less than everyone else in the country, which is a historical new.
Mm-hmm.
But we have, this might be one of the few places in the country where we have a lot of that going on. And to call it a boom, I think is a pretty accurate description.
Sure. And Twin Falls is always, people don't really think of Twin Falls as being an industrial city, but it really is if you start thinking about Glambia and the sugar factory and the potato processing, and now, of course, Chobani and then Cliff Bar and others that are in the area. We really are an industrial city, mostly ag-related. I mean, we occasionally, people come talk to us a little bit about possibly locating in Twin Falls that aren't ag-related. We've just had one recently along that line. We don't seem to have some of the nexus that they need. You know, like we don't have a major university here for the research things and some of that stuff for us to usually bring some of us in. But we're always talking to them just so that we can, and as small and large, just so you can kind of diversify your economy. Because if you should have a really bad something happen like last summer and and you get 5 inches of rain in a day, and it kind of takes care of a lot of the agriculture stuff. You don't really want to spread your wealth around so that you can keep your economy flowing. And of course, Twin Falls is a huge retail. I don't think people realize that City of Twin Falls does $1 billion a year in retail.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that.
$1 billion a year in retail is in the city of Twin Falls. And so it is just a hub, northern Nevada up to Blaine County, clear to, maybe as far as Glenn's Ferry to the west, and then certainly the Burley Rupert and Raft River area to the east. A lot of those people come here and shop. Go to Costco sometime and look at what the license plates have. That's what I love about Idaho's license plates. You can tell where a car's from by their license plate, except for those people who have vanity plates. You can't tell there, but everybody else, you can, if it's a 5B plate or a 4C or whatever it may be, you can tell this car's from a different area. Most states can't do that. Wyoming you can, but if you knew the code in Wyoming, I suppose, because they use numbers. I'm always a little confused. But we also have got a lot of other infrastructure things that are going on right now that people may have kind of forgotten about. We had the big bond a few years ago to build a sewage treatment plant. That's mostly going to come online in July, and then the rest of it will be in December, which will more than double, or almost double our sewage treatment capacity, which allows us to start, allowing us to, like neighborhoods and things like that to start to grow, new neighborhoods and things. We've really been kind of had to clamp on those a little bit because we didn't have the sewer capacity. And then as part of the Cliff Bar infrastructure urban renewal effort, and along with the city and Chobani, build a new 5 million gallon water tank out there on Hankins and Kimberly Road, which really points to those that were here a couple of years ago when we had a power outage down in the canyon, and Idaho Power couldn't figure out what it was, and it was over at the pumps where we pump our Blue Lakes water, not the pumps up, but the pumps right over at the well sites, and we ran out of water. We were going down quickly. We had to shut down all of our industry. All the restaurants had to go to paper plates and plastic and all those things just to get us through that time span. It's just because we didn't have enough storage. So now, with some of the help from Cliff Bar and these others, we were able to build a 5 million gallon water tank, and that it helps the entire system. Water storage anywhere on a loop system like Twin Falls has is storage. It doesn't matter where it's at. We can get that water to anywhere in the city, and so that helps keep us from having a problem like that in the future where we lose power for 6 or 7 hours, or I guess it's more like 10 we lost power, but makes us so that we can carry on business. Like on that particular one, all of our industry lost one shift. They lost 1 8-hour time span of people being able to go to work and do product and things like that. Everybody lost 8 hours, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen.
When Mr. Talkington was here a couple of weeks ago, he was telling me that, and I think it's an interesting approach. You could sit down and try to look into a crystal ball and predict where the growth is going to be, but he said that's nearly impossible to do. You almost have to let things grow organically, and then what you do is government works around that. So government doesn't really interfere with that if you do it correctly. You just let business grow, and that employs people and the like. But I was thinking about something, and this might be years off. We have at least a decent water supply here, despite being in the high desert. What's going on in neighboring California is going to cause a lot of those people to look for new places to do business and live. And a lot of them are going to be looking at places like southern Idaho, I would think, because it's relatively close.
Right.
But could we, how much more growth could we sustain if a lot of those people suddenly said, look, the guy who installed my cable a few weeks ago was from California. He was one of those refugees. How much more growth could we see if something like that starts to pick up?
Well, most of our growth projections are based on a 2% per year, and at 2%, we still have to be out there attracting new entities. Maybe not Chobani size or Cliff size, but at least new employers coming to town that aren't just retail, but they're doing like you just talked about. We try to find the manufacturing jobs because traditionally they are more than some of the others, and at least offer benefits and those kinds of things that we're looking for employees. We've got I would say safely a 50-year water supply right now. Though we're for 50 years we're set. A lot of it's due to conservation, though. And we know we are not, even with Chobani online using 1 million gallons a day and some of these other expansion of some of these other companies, we're still using less water than we did in 2004. okay, so per day on a peak basis. You have to do everything on a peak because you need the water when you need it, and so you have to base everything on peak. We may only be using most often in the summer maybe 20 million, but you have to plan for that day that it's 110 degrees or 108 and you're using 26 million gallons. And so we're I kind of lost my thought there. Got off on a side part. I'm sorry, but anyway, I feel we're safely at 50 years, and again, it's because of conservation plus the every other day watering, the PI systems that we've put into place for the brand new neighborhoods, and we retrofitted a few older neighborhoods, so they're using canal water, not using potable water, which makes a huge difference because. Think about it, that's where most of the water goes to in the summertime.
Sure.
Why the peak is there is because it's people watering lawns, watering trees, and keeping their houses looking good, which we all want to do. And so, if the more canal water we can use on that, because the city of Twin Falls, the article in the paper the other day said we're one of the largest water shareholders in Twin Falls tract. I didn't realize that we had that many water shares, but as new subdivisions come on, those water shares come to us. Then we use them to water that, and then other things. Plus, we lease out some to keep areas farming. You got to keep your economy humming as well. So you can't use it all for lawns.
Yeah, it's true. And some places they're learning that the hard way.
Right.
At this point. For people, again, who, and I always like to ask this, you pointed out to me in the break before we went on air that a lot of people watch meetings now via the computer. They can watch online, and so you don't necessarily get people at meetings quite as often. But a lot of people, and I used to be one of those, you'd go to a meeting, you'd sit there, and then maybe a few days later something pops into your head, a question. What should they do if they have a question or comment for someone at City Hall? Could they do it on the web? Can they just give a telephone call? What would you recommend?
Well, either one. I mean, it's probably obviously the easiest, I think, to send an email if you're someone who uses email, which I imagine is probably getting up into the 90 percentile of something there in that neighborhood. Now, that's probably the easiest because then you've written down everything that you want to know about. You can also certainly call City Hall, call the main City Hall number that I don't have on the top of my head because it's in my phone and I just punched City Hall. But call that number, or you email, go on our website, tfid.org. I'll say it slower because it's tfid.org, and it will lead you to all kinds of contact numbers, including mine. My email address is there just like anyone else's. And you can we're a small enough city, you can still email us as city councilmen. We enjoy that, to be honest with you. We get a chance to communicate back and forth with the public a little bit. I would like to have some who are just asking questions, not just being upset about something.
Yeah, sometimes a question is a good idea.
Right.
We were asking people earlier in the show today for solutions, and sometimes the public actually comes up with a good idea.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I was actually in Costco yesterday. I actually do that when the weather's a little cooler. I go there and walk and things. I was actually doing some exercise there and run into somebody. They gave me an idea, and I started talking to some of our city people about it. What is the possibility of doing this? And it was dealing with a new park and part of the trail system.
Well, Craig Lanning, I want to thank you for dropping by today.
All right.
We've got a break coming up, 9:20, 39 at our studios. I wanted to mention, if I could, my friends at Western States Bus Services, who have done a great deal to make this program possible over the last 3 months. And gosh, we had them in the studio with us one day. And very, very nice people over there. They're currently hiring part-time bus drivers and split shifts 5 days per week, summers off. Now, during the summer months this year, they may be able to train people, and you don't have to worry about a lot of driving at that point. That would start again in the fall. Scheduled, no school days. That would be a snow day or something like that. Pay is $10.75 per hour. You can apply today. You can contact 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. And if you were with us earlier, we had Russell Singleton. He's a physician assistant at Tripp Family Medicine in studio with us today. They'll be back next week. Wednesday, next week, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'll have another topic related to your health and how you can improve your health. And if you feel free, give us a shout that morning too as well. We had a caller today who had a very good point about weight loss, especially how so much of it is cyclical. And as I was listening to him talk, I was thinking, he's absolutely right. You gain weight during the holidays because someone always is putting out, I don't prepare cranberry sauce on my own, but if someone puts some down in front of me, I can't stop eating it. And also during the holiday season, well, I don't know what part of the country, you can determine what part of the country people are from. In my part of the country, it's pecan pie. Some places it's pecan. And you eat one slice of that, and that's probably enough sugar for you for the next month. But during the holiday season, I maybe only eat it twice, but I eat a lot of it. And a big slice, I should point out. You get that sugar high that lasts for 3 days. But the guy was spot on with his comments, and we got into a discussion about that. That's what we're trying to do every week. We're trying to foster that discussion with all of you about your health, and maybe perhaps it can lead you to some conclusions to actually improve certain habits you have, and that will improve your health at that point. Remember, you can tune in on Wednesdays for Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine right here at News Radio 1310 KLIX, along with newsradio1310.com. That means you can hear us on the internet. Listen live. You click on that feature, you can hear us anywhere around the world. We had a conversation on Monday with Randy Staples from Idaho Weekly Briefing, and I wanted to get back to something on that for just a quick moment if I could. It's 9:26, 38 at our studios. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. We had a discussion about some folks in the eastern part of the state, some Republicans actually, I think it was Bonneville County, where a spokesperson for the county chairman had been talking about the dangers posed by Islam to what we still consider a free society in this country. And there are a lot of people who feel that the faith, Islamic faith, is not compatible with Western values. And Randy was saying he thought that was over-exaggerated. He said, I don't see where people in Idaho, Muslims, are storing weapons out in the sagebrush to attack us. And we had a conversation, but I think he did conclude, and I was trying to make that point. It comes down to numbers. If you have 1,000 people in a population of 1 million, they're not much of a threat, even if they wanted to be. Even if they aren't, we're not going to judge them on that sense right now. But if you have 400,000 in that population suddenly, then they start asking for things that they would think that they would want that might make us uncomfortable. And we were talking about, for instance, the call to prayer in Pocatello, the Muslim call to prayer. There has been a request for that. And I think the argument will be, look, I have to listen to church bells. You can listen to my request or my call to prayer. 9:27 now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. This morning I happened to see something, and I bring this point up, and maybe we can expand on it following the 9:30 break, because everyone who says there's no need to worry about any of this right now, and you people in talk radio are just firing people up, and that's not nice, and politicians are just fear-mongering. Remember when, to use an analogy on another issue, remember when the same-sex community said, we only want civil unions so we can get the benefits that other couples have. We don't want marriage, we just want civil unions. All right, you got civil unions. Well, we just want marriage because it's marriage equality. They created that phrase, equality. That's a sales phrase. That's a public relations move. We want marriage equality. We just want marriage. And everyone said, well, I don't know. I mean, you told us before this would not be a slippery slope. Hey, you're not being fair. You're being a hater. We just want marriage. Now they have marriage. Okay, let's move beyond that for a moment. Now we've got them saying, hey, you need to participate in my marriage. And if you don't, we're going to make a lot of trouble for you. You'll be fined and perhaps jailed. You see how this has gotten out of hand? So when I hear someone say, well, we really shouldn't be concerned about the growth of Islam. I mean, in Idaho, this isn't a serious issue here. Yes, but someday it could be. And are we prepared? See, there's a question I'd like to ask you, because I'm going to share with you after the 9:30 break a piece I happened to see today written by Bethany Blankley. Now, if you recognize the last name, Tony Blankley used to be an editor for many, many years at the Washington Times, and he is one of those people who really kept that newspaper afloat during some dire times. And then he passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago from cancer. My guess is Bethany Blankley is a relative and working at the same paper, but likely with a lot of the same thinking process, and I would imagine it's a daughter, the same thinking process that her father had, and he was an astute man. But she is talking about how Common Core which you've heard about, has actually been designed to proselytize for Islam in our schools. And if you recall, we had a local school a block from this radio station just a couple of months ago offering up a quote. Well, it was a quote attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. We don't know if it was actually his or not. But this is a very slow, we'll get to it in a couple of minutes. More details on that. 37 at Top Story. It's 9:30. If you're just joining us, I'll do a little recap. I was talking a few minutes ago about a controversy that ended up piping up in eastern Idaho. Oh, golly, last week, where Republican County Committee put out some thoughts and warnings about the increasing creep of Islam into the state of Idaho and what that could ultimately mean for all of us. And, of course, they were roundly mocked by newspapers across the state and by a handful of liberals. Well, I guess that's the newspaper people. Really? Are there any liberals outside of Idaho's newspapers? Difficult to find them, I suppose. But these people were roundly mocked because, well, they're just being mean-spirited and, ha, 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 ha. We haven't seen ISIS at work here anywhere in the state. Ha, 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 ha. I want to share something with you. And maybe it's time we start thinking about, in a way, a peremptory, is that the word? Someone will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong, but how do we ensure that certain things that have happened in other parts of the world and even other parts of our own country do not happen here? I happened to see a piece from a writer named Bethany Blankley today at Washington Times, and the headline is Common Core Ties to Libya, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Now, that's Qatar that is spelled Qatar, and they are a supposed American ally. In fact, we had our command there in their country during the war with Iraq. But still, a lot of these people are fair weather friends, I think, in that part of the world. You're listening to Bill Colley this morning on Top Story. It's 37, 9:35 at our studios. 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com online. That means you can click on Listen Live and pick us up really anywhere. She's writing this. In 2014-15 America, public school students via Common Core are, and she has some bullet points here, participating in public school-sponsored trips to mosques via taxpayer expense. Girls must wear headscarves. That's from Colorado. Debating whether or not the Holocaust was, quote, merely a political scheme created to influence public emotion and gain, unquote. That's from an 8th grade assignment in Los Angeles. That's in California for you public school grads. Pledging allegiance in Arabic. That was in New York State, actually up in the Catskill region. That happened just recently. Observing 2 Muslim holy days. That's in New York City. Being taught Islamic vocabulary lessons. That in North Carolina. Being taught Islamic culture. Tennessee. Now, you can't teach Christian culture in schools any longer, but you can teach, but we need to know more about these people overseas. Why don't we start learning about ourselves? Oh, we don't want to do that. Those Christians are haters. Here's another one. Being taught world history from an Islamic perspective. That was in Florida. That includes learning about the 5 pillars of Islam. That was in Maryland, where a father, a Marine Corps veteran, complained and was banned then from school grounds. How about this? Told to proselytize by creating a pamphlet about Islam to, quote, introduce Islam to 3rd graders, unquote. That introduces Allah to children as the same God of the Christians and Jews. That was in Michigan. Here's another one. Reciting in class the Shahada, there is no God but Allah, and the Muslim call to prayer. That was in Massachusetts. Now, still you might say that's Massachusetts, the People's Republic of Massachusetts. That's Michigan, where you've got all of those unemployed auto union workers, and they're sitting around on the government dime, waiting for someone to come back and restore their $83 an hour jobs. All right, you could say it's not Idaho. Idaho were a lot more sensible. But you may remember there's an elementary school just down the street from our radio station. It's called Oregon Trail Elementary. And I had brought this up a couple of months ago on air. During the morning announcements there a couple of months ago, somebody decided it would be a wise thing to share some quotes from the Prophet Muhammad. Even though you may not believe he's a prophet, he's only a prophet if you're a member of that faith. Otherwise, he's just a charlatan. And a fraud and a phony. If you're a Christian, when Jesus said, I am the way, he did not say, oh, and by the way, Muhammad and Buddha and I'll have some more names for you later on when I come around the second time. Didn't happen that way, okay? And we're told that we're being exclusive, I guess, if we do that, and that's not nice. Somebody's feelings might be hurt, including the Islamists. But we brought it up on the air, and I ended up I was told I should not communicate with the principal at the school, who may have been the one who actually announced the quote from the Prophet Muhammad. And I got a rather terse email from the public relations individual at the Twin Falls School District saying I was not to communicate with the principal on these matters, but I was to communicate with the public relations flack. As if somehow there's a rule or a regulation that says, I'm working at a radio station, I'm not in the employ of that school district, but as if somehow they could dictate that to me. And they thought they'd squash that immediately. That they didn't talk about it anymore. You should notice as well that your local newspaper really didn't delve into that either. That selective editing that goes on when they have those morning meetings. They said, "Oh, we might offend somebody, and offensive is bad and wrong and mean." And we should all learn about other cultures because other cultures are so warm and fuzzy. And that religion of peace only killed 145 people last week. In one attack, in just one place. And the Jerusalem Post reported yesterday 1,700 bodies found in a mass grave, people killed by ISIS in just one attack. That did not get reported in this country. But I'm telling you right now, this is a serious concern for all of us because this Common Core, I'll talk more about this perhaps following this break, but it's a serious concern because again, it's the same thing. The arguments they made with same-sex marriage. Oh, don't give me that slippery slope. That's not what we're looking for. It is the incrementalism. That's how they do it. We've got more coming up. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 9:40:38 at our studios in Rain. Just to let you know, if you'd like to reach our program today, you can give us a shout at 736-0300. That is 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Telephone number 736-0300 or email me bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. And that last name is spelled Colley. We have been talking about creeping Islam in this country. And of course, some people say, but it's in Common Core. They're going to be spoon-feeding it to your children at school. And we're seeing it even in Twin Falls, as I've pointed out in the past. We have a caller with us. It's 9:44. Want to thank the caller for patience. 38 at our studios. You're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX and Top Story.
Yes, I had a comment on that. There a while back, Kelly and Jill brought a guest in and talked to them that there was a refugee that was brought over here. And we supported him. They brought him over here, and he's a CSI refugee because they have a camp over here in Twin. That's refuge program with CSI. And the government was giving him Medicare, and they was giving him free housing, food stamps, and everything. And there's many over there that same way, and we are paying to bring them over here and giving them a life of our taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
And that. And he sat there and said right on the radio that you have a certain amount of time, but there are many over there that's been over there for a year or so, and they're just wanting to collect our Medicaid, and that and all the CFI is teaching them, and still coming out of taxpayers' money, so we have a whole refugee there.
And I thank you for the call. We have a situation going on where it's very similar to what Europe has done. Europe has brought in all of these people by the millions. And Europe, I was just reading today, there's a Pew Research Center, a survey that says Europe will not be a Christian continent in 50 years. It'll be a Muslim continent. These people come in and they get the generous welfare benefits. And the governments say, well, we have to do it. It's the nice thing to do. And if we don't do it, it would be mean. They're willing to throw away their cultures, their way of life, their governments, and they're willing someday to live under the yoke of Islam because otherwise it would be mean to object. I don't understand the logic behind that. You do have a fellow in England, I've mentioned him a couple of times in the last week, by the name of Nigel Farage, and he is the leader of a party called the United Kingdom Independent Party, and he doesn't have enough clout yet to win the general election in that country on May 15th, but he could be the guy who really controls the government, especially if someone has to rule with a coalition government. And he has been making the same point. And yet every time he brings up that point, they call him a racist, they call him a bigot. They say that he is just, he is just a terrible human being, and that he belongs to another era of knuckle-dragging Britons, back when Britain ruled the world. Okay. They ruled the world. How did that happen? Well, because they had their crap together, that's why. And they don't have their crap together anymore. And he's viewed as being somehow the villain in all of this, because he's simply speaking out and saying maybe we should get our crap together again. So we've got a lot of that going on in this country too as well. And unfortunately, until we put Libby back in his place and give Libby an education and make Libby understand that the gravy train can't keep coming forever, we're going to be dealing with this. There's a piece this morning in the Washington Post from Dana Milbank, or Montebank, or whatever he calls himself, and he is writing about the states across the country that are putting restrictions on food stamp use because it's mean. Look, I had a friend who was working in a deli. She would tell me that these people would come in with their EBT cards. See, they changed the name. Food stamps got a bad name, then they called it SNAP, and that got a bad name. And then now they call it just your EBT card. It looks like a bank card. They would come in, family would come in, mom and maybe, 4 or 5 kids from 4 or 5 different dads. And she would buy submarine sandwiches for all of them, and each would get a little individual, not a big bag of chips, which would be cheaper. They'd all individually go over and get a little bag of chips of what they wanted. Then they'd get 44-ounce Pepsis, and then they'd pay for it with an EBT card. And that was considered okay. And my friend said, I can't even live like that. I can't go around eating expensive submarine sandwiches every day. I've got to go to the grocery store, buy some healthy food, go home and cook it, which is the cheaper alternative. Now, he is saying that states that are trying to crack down on that, saying, you can't use your EBT card at a casino or at an open-air drug mart. Oh, I guess that doesn't happen, but not yet. But he's saying it's mean-spirited. The taxpayers would like a better accounting because these people are getting... Look, I don't want to be on EBT either. I'm telling you that right now. But what we're overlooking is a lot of those people have found ways to actually make money on the side, which is why they can use the EBT card on all of those luxuries. And the dirty little secret, he's also critical of states that are drug testing welfare recipients, or would like to. The dirty little secret why a lot of those people have all of that money that they can use for EBT cards on submarine sandwiches is because they've got a wad of cash already in their pockets. Let's get back to that drug testing issue, because guess what they're doing is a secondary line of work. They're dealing dope. And to say that is mean-spirited, I'm sorry, but you are ruining my country and you are emptying my bank account in order to do it, and I am obviously hostile about it for a very good reason. Reverend Mike Huckabee, Governor Mike Huckabee, coming up in just a moment with the Huckabee Report. Whew. Brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls, 736-6563. And thank you very much, Governor Huckabee. I've got a quick message I want to pass along. We're at 9:54. You're listening to Bill Colley this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And 39, been holding quite steady, 38 or 39 throughout the show this morning, and some rain in the area. This was passed along to me, and it's a good public service announcement. The headline is Bill Federer, American Minute, will be in Jerome. And the email says, for your information, William Federer is speaking at the Homeschooling Conference in Boise, along with John Eitzmore and Marshall Foster on Friday and Saturday, April 10 and 11. Bill Federer will be speaking at our church, the writer says, Magic Valley Evangelical Free Church, at 821 East Avenue H, that's near the high school in Jerome, on Sunday, April 12th, at 9:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. And he is a talk show host, of course, and author of The American Minute and other books. And the writer says, I hope you can attend one or both of these meetings on Sunday, and please invite anyone else who may be interested in our Christian American history. Amen. Thank you very much for passing that along. Quickly, I was talking about that piece earlier today during the course of the show from the Washington Times and Bethany Blankley about how Common Core is actually an Islamic-based effort. It really is. And you may not believe this, but she has this information. Common Core origins. Common Core originated from the One World Education. One World Education is in quotes. One World Education concept a global goal orchestrated by the Connect All Schools program. Its origin is funded by the Qatar, and again, that's the country, QATAR, the Qatar Foundation International, known as QFI. The director of QFI's Research Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics is Tariq Ramadan, grandson of Muslim Brotherhood founder Hassan al-Banna. Now, these are not nice people. What they have done is they have developed this system. It is called Common Core in this country, which is an Orwellian way to label it, because if they actually said, hey, it's Islamic conversion education, you wouldn't buy into it now, would you? But this is actually what we're talking about. In 2011, QFI, quote, partnered with the Department of State and the U.S. Department of Education to facilitate matchmaking between classrooms in the U.S. and international schools through the Connect All Schools project, unquote. QFI states on its website that the initiative was founded in response to President Obama's infamous 2009 Cairo speech, during which the Muslim Brotherhood was seated in the front row. You remember that. He was over there apologizing at the time. His mentor, domestic terrorist Bill Ayers, received $49.2 million from Vartan Gregorian, a board member of the Qatar Foundation, who also was involved with Mr. Obama's White House Fellowships Commission. Gregorian is an integral part of the Connect All Schools, through which Qatar invested $5 million to teach Arabic in American public schools. There's much, much more. If you have access to the Washington Times, I used to be able to buy it on a newsstand. Actually, at that very same deli where people used to come in and buy submarine sandwiches, potato chips, and 44-ounce Pepsis with their EBT cards. I don't know that I have that access to it any longer, but I do look at it on the internet every day. So if you go to WashingtonTimes.com and you go to the opinion section today, look for the author Bethany Blankley, and you can have a close look at this. It's a little lengthy. Usual Washington Times columns are maybe a page and a half to two when you print them out. Now, this is considerably longer, but I highly recommend it. We need to be educated about this ourselves. We need to know what we're up against, because if we don't, we're going to lose this great country, if we already haven't. 9:58. Bill Colley with you. Sean Hannity. He won't be up until 1. Rush Limbaugh is scheduled next, following news from Fox at 10 o'clock. Sean Hannity after the 1 o'clock news. Glenn Beck after 4 o'clock news. Dave Ramsey tonight. Oh, and if you'd like to learn a little bit about spacemen, overnight, coast to coast. Thanks again for joining me. God willing and the creek don't rise, I'm back in this seat between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.